To take a moment and show you this. This is bizarre. Last week, recall if you will, I filmed an episode on Tuesday showing how on Monday morning at 8:40 I sold everything and the stock market went to an all-cash position. The market lost 3,200 points that week, including the largest one-day drop in history. This Monday, they had the largest one-day gain in history, over 1,200 points. And it's now Tuesday morning, March the 3rd, Super Tuesday. And I just had to show you this little program I use called Stocks. And it monitors different stocks I have. But also the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the SP 500. We've finished an hour and 7 minutes of trading. The Dow Jones has been plus 300 and minus 300 with a high of 27,000 and a low of 26,351. So a 700 point swing, and it just goes back and forth. Right now it's at 29.60 to the positive. A few minutes ago it was minus 6. And this morning the Federal Reserve announced a half-point cut in the interest rate, which was already ridiculously low. Their regular meeting was for the middle of the month, but today they announced a half-point drop in the interest rate in order to apparently deal with the coronavirus thing. Now, take a look here. We got stocks reverse losses turn higher after Fed rate cut 19 minutes ago. And stocks fall after Fed slashes rates and move widely expected to combat coronavirus 7 minutes ago. And 5 minutes ago on CNN Business, stock market has no idea how to react to the Fed's emergency rate cut. Well, the Fed's rate cut is total nonsense, total panic. A half point is ridiculous. And by the way, the Federal Reserve Bank can't cure or stop the coronavirus. Neither can they address the component supply problem many companies face in getting parts from China. They can't address it at all, but they felt they had to do something, and so they picked something extreme. In the United States Navy, we referred to this in an age-old military axiom: when in danger, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. Meaning that panic is always appropriate. Well, man, we've got it today. And this Dow Jones is not only particularly frothy or panic-stricken, the herd is in full stampede, and they don't know which way to stampede. The Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500 normally march pretty much together. Several times this morning, they have completely gone in different directions. Here's Tesla's up $32, Amazon's up 26, Enphase up $1.60, Uber's up 56 cents. So the stocks I like are moving up a bit this morning. Unfortunately, I don't have any of them. I did buy some Apple, some Amazon, and some Uber call options, and quite a few of them. That doesn't cost me a lot of money. They're way out of the money, futures, and they're for September. So kind of a longer time frame. I don't advise this with Tesla because there's a huge premium baked into the cake on options for Tesla. The jig is up. Everybody knows about it. And so there was so much burnt to the ground by me and others in January that they've simply made options unaffordable for these companies. But they're not so much for Amazon and Apple, which are more sedate players. Up here we are, up 100 at the moment. Meanwhile, you can see over here, I'm monitoring my Model 3 controller at the shop. I'm at home in the bedroom in my underwear at the moment, but I can monitor my Model 3 activity here, and I can also monitor my Cinch thing. And right now we're not making any. We were making 11,387. And what has happened there is we have had a beautiful morning after tornadoes last night, a beautiful sunny morning. And you can see from our solar edge, our output climbing beautifully all morning, and it's 9:42 at the moment until this point here, at which point we dropped to zero. Well, what happened here? Our Model 3 controller I'm experimenting with and using a function where you can specify the number of amps charging it will allow. We were overrunning a 20 kilowatt inverter, a Sandy inverter, and it was alarming out and shutting down because we were going over 20 kilowatts, charging back through it, treating it as a rectifier for our in-phase and solar edge outputs. Fortunately, that inverter is equipped with a 60 to 62.5 hertz frequency shift function that we can trigger, and I shift it on current levels that you can now configure because I don't know what size inverter you're going to be using with the Model 3 battery, and so you get to define that. And so that's working pretty well, and we're currently not charging. As you can see, we're doing 1.17. There we go. It just jumped in to charging. Recall our frequency shift takes us about 500 millisecond frequency shift takes down our grid-tied inverters for a period of 300 seconds, 5 minutes. And then they kick back in. And so we can see on our graph, our Cinch graph here, that we're now back up to 11,700 watts on the solar edge side. And we can see on our Model 3 that we're doing about 7,666 watts on the in-phase side. We have 40 panels with in-phases. And so we're charging like hell now. I've got the voltage set to 4.12 volts. And so we're just about full. Now I'm not showing 100% because I don't let the battery charge to 100%, about 80%. And there we go. We have kicked it back out, probably on voltage. Basically, my battery is full, but it'll continue to go in and out as we go. And there it came on just briefly and then got kicked back off. We're just overpowering it with solar. A beautiful sunny day in Missouri. And so that's what's going on. So that's what I'm doing this morning, is watching the stock market twitch on the occasion of panic still over the coronavirus. The trading app Robinhood is actually out again today, all day yesterday, and there's 10 million people who have signed up with this application, this app, to trade stocks with no fees. And yesterday, for the entire day, while the stock market went up 1,200 points, they were entirely cut off. And now, an hour into it, it's happened again. So we're reaching such points of hysteria. It's feasible to see the NASDAQ or the Dow Jones or the New York Stock Exchange actually strain their systems to where you won't be able to get data. That's conceivable. It hadn't happened yet. But we're just absolutely winning danger, winning out, running circles, screaming, shout, and it's all over the coronavirus. The Fed cut a half a point, which is a dramatic move and not at their normal time. Now, what does that mean? They're going to do something about the coronavirus? Well, not really. Or does it mean they know something that we don't about the coronavirus and it's actually much worse than we're being told? And so that's the thought process going on in Wall Street at the moment. And it's absolute hysteria. There's no factual basis for any of it. It's just nonsense. And so I remain handily in cash. I was not in the slightest bit tempted to the dead cat bounce of yesterday or of today. And as long as we see this hysteria, I'm not in the stock market. I'm not even kind of in it. I am kind of hedging, missing out with some long call options way out of the money on more stable stocks like Apple and Amazon and Uber. Actually, Uber's gotten up to $41. It's down to $33.69. Very attractive. I'd like to buy back in, but I can't in this market. So what I've done is bought some contracts. Now, I understand I've got about $2.3 million in cash, and I've spent $40,000 or $50,000 on these call contracts. If I lose it all, I'm fine. It's just, think of it as a side bet. Let's talk about the coronavirus and the hysteria. And by the way, for all you Trump haters, I'm just in awe of the guy. He has been so all over it, and everyone on TV is screaming that he doesn't know what he's doing and he's hosing it all up. Man, is our news cycle as screwed up as our stock market. A few weeks ago, they were calling him a xenophobe for initiating travel restrictions on flights from China and Asia, and that he was just a xenophobe and was against Asian people. This was 3 weeks after the Chinese announced that they even had a coronavirus, and he had already initiated travel restrictions and quarantines based on people coming from China, later Korea and Japan and so forth. So he's also convened a committee under Vice President Pence with all the right people, I think, in the game, including the head of Health and Human Services, Dr. Ben Carson, who at one point ran the neurosurgery department at Johns Hopkins Hospital. His spokesperson, that's been on several times, is remarkably lucid and calm, and I believe making every effort at transparency, at leveling with the American public without being alarmist. So I'm very pleased with what they're doing. They're focused on three things, two of which I think are very important, and the role of government at the federal level. The first is the development. Excuse me, I've got a little corona cough here going. The first is that we be able to adequately identify cases of coronavirus. And that means a test kit that can accurately diagnose coronavirus in humanoids. They had sent out a bunch of kits initially that proved unreliable, giving both false positives and false negatives, so not much of a test kit. So they're kind of focused on developing a test that's reliably diagnoses COVID-19 virus. And here we are, we're down 66 now. This stock market is just crazy. Item 2 is developing a vaccine for coronavirus. And item 3 is developing a cure, quote unquote. As I said, we can't precisely cure a virus. Your body can cure a virus. Your immune system can, but we don't really have very effective medicines that are antivirals. And they don't cure anybody of a virus. The third one is kind of a reach. Everyone is poo-pooing the vaccine as being too far off in the future, exhibiting everything that they know about it, which is nothing, which we're getting a lot of misinformation about viruses out there. The test is actually quite difficult, but they can do that, and the challenge there is to one, verify that it is accurate, and two, dispense enough of them to matter. They need to get the test kits on the ground at hospitals and laboratories across the country where this can be done quickly rather than having to send it to a few CDC authorized laboratories. So that's very important and very much a priority. The vaccine, around 2000, we embarked on a sort of manned moon mission project in pharma called the Human Genome. And that was to map the 56 million genes in the human deoxyribonucleic acid DNA string. this was a great thing, and like the manned moonshot, has thrown off a lot of useful technologies. And so our tools for gene sequencing and even editing have advanced enormously in the last 20 years. And so the process of making a vaccine, the vaccine is sort of a, you take the virus, put it in a blender and kill it, and then inject people with it, and that causes their immune system to develop these T lymphocyte killer cells that basically go around the body identifying any of your cells that harbor the virus, and it attacks, eats, and kills that cell, not just the virus, but the cell the virus is in, is destroyed, utterly dismembered, and excreted as trash. And so this is how your body actually cures you of coronavirus, and many people are actually recovered from the virus, and most will be. But that's so a vaccine is a way of artificially triggering an immune system response to the virus, and so they have to genetically engineer something very similar to the virus, but that is non-reproductive, basically. And so this is not as far-fetched as people think. The problem actually isn't developing the vaccine, and they already have, by the way. And they're testing it now to see how effective it is, and I approve of all that. I'm not sure how you test a coronavirus vaccine without intentionally exposing people to the actual coronavirus, but that's where we're at. They've already genetically spliced and edited a test vaccine, and it's under test. The problem is not in creating such a vaccine, it's in producing it. You can make small quantities of it in a laboratory using these tools, but then how do you translate that into a production environment where you're producing vats of it? And then how do you distribute it? And who gets it first? These are all problematic questions. Let's take a look at the worst case situation and why you shouldn't really panic. We're about to test our tornado system, which they tested last night, and it tested fine, by the way. In any event, testing is good, and there it goes. So let's talk a little bit about reality. Coronavirus is not like influenza. It is influenza. It is a type of influenza, a mutation, and in this case, kind of a deadly one. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, their minimum or most conservative estimates of influenza in the U.S. from October 1st, 2019 to February 22nd of 2020 would indicate 19 million cases of influenza in the United States. And of that, about 18,000 deaths. And that's a death rate of Let's see here. 18,000 divided by 19 is about 0.09%, a little less than 0.1% fatality rate. However, it's 18,000 people that are dead, and that is the minimum or most conservative estimates of the flu season here in the U.S. now. Now, coronavirus is an influenza, but it's a little more lethal. And if we take the given calculations of 2.1% fatality rate, which I think may be a little low, I think this may be actually a little more lethal than that. That would indicate if we got 19 million cases, and we're at 85, I think, now in the U.S., but if we reach 19 million, that's 670,000 deaths at 2.1% fatality. So you can see why the coronavirus is fearsome, and it's just a much higher fatality rate. The symptoms are not really much worse than regular influenza. In fact, for a lot of people, this is like getting a cold. But for some, such as myself, with respiratory issues and heart issues and so forth, particularly older and particularly men, the coronavirus can be quite deadly. By quite deadly, we're still talking about 2.1%. 672,000 people could be killed if we had an outbreak of 19 million people getting the coronavirus. And obviously, we're working hard to reduce that. So why does quarantine work? The virus has to have a host. I've seen ridiculous flat statements made on the internet that this virus can live for 9 days on a surface. And trust me, it can't. 45 minutes is more likely. 2 to 3 hours conceivable. But that's it. It has to have a live host to survive at all. If it kills the host, every virus in the host dies on location. Not in the first minute of death, but over the next few hours as the cells themselves die off, they take the virus with it. If you're infected and you don't die, you develop these T lymphocytes that kill all the cells in your body that have the virus. And at that point, you're immune. Any new infection coming in has the same fate, but faster. And so it can take some days, 5 days, 2 weeks, to develop these T lymphocytes, depending on the virus and how difficult it is to map. And so that's kind of the process there of getting well. Well, if you have 1,000 people and they're isolated and 21 of them die and the rest get the disease, they all get the disease, let's say, but get well, the virus has no place to go. The ones it killed are dead, and the ones left living are immune. They already have the T lymphocytes. And that is the end of the outbreak, by the way. that terminates that mutation of that virus forever. It can't come back. It's dead. It's eradicated. The problem is we never quite get 100% containment. If one person with the virus, but who has not shown signs, symptoms yet, or has not developed the immunity, escapes the quarantine and goes and has contact with other people who are not already immune, they have a vector for the virus. It can jump from one person to millions. And so the problem with quarantines is achieving 100% quarantine. And so our focus rightly should be on detection and on a vaccine to surround and kill this virus. As a matter of public policy, well, let's talk first about springtime. The virus will go away in the spring because the virus doesn't like higher temperatures. This is preposterous. The virus lives in a temperature of 98.6 degrees pretty stably, and it does just fine if that temperature goes up as a result of your infection. And so the virus doesn't care about the calendar. It doesn't care about any of that. The reason we note a diminishment in flu or cold season with the spring is because we quit staying inside, breathing each other's air, and we go outside and start going to the beach. And we're just more widely separated. Instead of going to the movie theater and sitting with 300 other people, each exchanging gases, we go outside and go surfing and play tennis, and it's tough to catch virus from your tennis partner who's on the other side of the net, just physically. And so that's the seasonality of virus replication is got to do with the proximity of people. And so you see calls for shutting down schools. We may eliminate Trump rallies. We might call off March Madness. Any number of things to prevent large gatherings of people that accelerate the spread of the virus. Now, I haven't seen a report on the virus that doesn't include a 26-year-old titty blonde newscaster giggling hysterically about washing your hands. Well, it's hard to be against hand washing. Your hands are a very mobile part of your body, capable of moving microbes around. By the way, your body has about 35 trillion cells, and you're carrying about 45 trillion free riders, and that is bacteria, viruses, and other microbial life that use you as transportation. And so it's pretty common to carry microbial life, but your hands are particularly good at it because that's what you use to press buttons in elevators, turn doorknobs, count your money that somebody else had a few minutes ago, and so forth. And then, of course, if you put your hands to your face, you have a good chance of transferring the virus, the coronavirus, to a mucous membrane, where it can then gain entry. So it makes sense, and it's perfectly logical, to advise people to do frequent hand washing. Unfortunately, it doesn't do any good at all, or very little, because you go in the restroom and you wash your hands, and then you leave the restroom, and when you push on the door to go out, you've just reinfected your hands. And so there is no study that I'm aware of, and I'd love to be proven wrong here, that actually draws a direct causal relationship between not washing your hands as opposed to washing your hands and the incidence of infection of any virus. And so it's one of those things that makes perfect sense, but it is probably not true. That said, wash your hands all you want. You can also partially sanitize surfaces with like a Clorox wipe or that sort of thing, antimicrobials. But the government has largely made almost everything that's truly antimicrobial illegal. And so it's kind of like bug sprays. We've reduced the ones that are available to those who don't actually do anything. And so your local bug spray guy can't really do much about your roaches and your ants and so forth, because all the tools that have been proven effective have been outlawed. There is two things in our world that have never been outlawed and would be if they were introduced today. One is, of course, aspirin. It would be instantly illegal, or at least require a prescription, but it predates that whole concept. Another one is Clorox bleach. You just can't quite get up the cojones to make Clorox bleach illegal, and I'm a huge fan of Clorox bleach. Clorox stock, by the way, has zoomed in the face of this because it is deadly directly to viruses and bacteria. I like it particularly because it's an oxygen ion alkaline mixture, and it works on bacteria by attaching an oxygen ion that's lacking an electron to the cell wall of the bacteria. And it does enough of these to weaken the cell wall and cause the bacteria to explode from the internal pressure of the cell, breaching the cell wall itself. And so I don't really want to kill bacteria. I like to watch them under a microscope blowing up, kind of Terminator style. And so there was a study a few years ago about Staphylococcus A bacteria that is almost completely resistant to antibiotics, and whose source, by the way, if you ever wonder, is almost entirely hospital. That is the breeding ground for Staph A, and it's where it comes from. And so they were doing a study rating the different products, some of them up to $150 per gallon, that were being sold to hospitals to disinfect floors and walls and tables and so forth, to try to control Staphylococcus A. And they tested each of these potions and lotions for their efficacy in doing this. Guess what was number one? And not by a little bit, it was by far and away the most effective thing. And that was the $2.40 gallon of Clorox bleach. And so I made whiskey and so forth and used Clorox to disinfect all glassware and metalware used in the process very effectively. It actually cleans glass better than Windex. It can just turn glass crystal clear. Clorox is a magic lotion. I would urge you to read the history of Clorox out in Oakland and the role of the founder's wife at her grocery store in turning this from a failed product to a century-old absolute winner. But if you introduced on the floor of any state legislature or the federal government or tried to enact any regulation of Clorox at all, you would be run out of town. And so they can't ban Clorox. It's the greatest thing in the world. What can you do to protect yourself from coronavirus? Well, the hand washing and just taking a lot of showers and disinfecting the surfaces around you are great. Obviously, avoiding large groups of people in basketball games, particularly indoor type activities, movie theaters, schools. Schools were invented so our children would have a place to go exchange microbes so they could bring fresh and new ones home to us adults in the house. So get rid of your kids is the best thing, and don't let them go to school if you don't want to give them up entirely. So that's some ways to stop it. Now I'm going to tell you a personal cure that I'm completely convinced of, and I believe I know how it works. And it's related to Guy's discovery with zinc, but with several other things that have been proven and disproven equally because of some basic misunderstanding of how they work. And I think I figured out how they work. The zinc was a non-physician who was one of the only people ever to be published in the New England Journal of Medicine with his zinc cure for the common cold. And he had been treating his daughter with a number of holistic vitamins and minerals and so forth because the poor girl had cancer. And he gave her some zinc tablets, and she had a cold on top of having her cancer. And she was so tired of taking pills, she didn't swallow them. And she went to bed with the zinc tablets in her mouth and woke up the next morning without really any symptoms of a cold. And so he studied this further and found that zinc was fairly effective at fighting off the cold. Some medical people immediately did a test and successfully disproved, which I think was their mission, the concept of zinc having any effect on the common cold at all, and they were completely effective at this. Of course, their test subjects didn't like the taste of zinc, and so they combined the zinc with sugar to make sweetened zinc tablets, and thereafter proved conclusively that zinc has no impact on the common cold. And they didn't cheat, and they didn't. I mean, this is all on the up and up, except they added sugar to the zinc to make the application of zinc more palatable. There have also been mixed reports regarding vitamin C and the common cold, the incidence of the common cold, reducing severity and length of it. And again, you can find a study proving this both ways. They're readily available on both sides. And so how can this be? How can you have a absolutely conclusive test result that it can be absolutely refuted when you try to replicate it? Well, you have to be careful what you replicate and what you study. And I believe that I've figured it out. It was not that zinc has any particular mystical properties. And it is not that vitamin C has any mystical properties. They're both acidic. Now, if you can take vitamin C in capsule form, they're not really acidic. And if you take vitamin C with too much sugar mixed in with the vitamin C, they're not acidic. Vitamin C is technically citric acid. My theory is that viruses have a difficult time replicating in an acidic environment. And so if you can raise the acid level of your nose and your throat and your mouth and so forth, you can slow the replication of the viruses. It doesn't kill any viruses. It doesn't cure anything. It slows their replication. And so if I get the first hint that I'm feeling like I have a cold or the flu, and after a while you can just kind of tell it's in the back of your nose and your top of your throat, you just kind of have this tickle, and you can associate that with what's coming. As soon as I feel that, I go eat 12 vitamin C tablets, and these are chewables. They're not sweetened, and they're quite sour. It's hard to, and I don't swallow them down. I chew them up and move them around in my mouth and hold them in my mouth, and I'll eat 12 of them, 500 milligrams, which is about 6 grams of vitamin C. And then I'll take 2 every hour or so for 3 days. And I absolutely believe I have made numerous colds and flus go away or appear to go away using this technique. I haven't actually cured anything, but your body will begin producing T lymphocytes whether you have one virus or 1 trillion viruses, viri. It doesn't care how many. If it detects it, it begins the immune response. And of course, with large populations, it also begins a histamine response, causing the runny nose, watery eyes, mucus, elevated temperature, and so forth, which are all defenses against viruses. So if I get a virus and I'm beginning to get an infection, and I can raise the acid level sufficiently, I can slow down the replication, putting off the day when I'm overwhelmed and killed by the cold virus or the influenza virus. And that buys me time while my body develops the ability to produce T lymphocyte killers that then attack the virus. And so it's kind of a delaying action, a delaying retreat from the virus by using acid. I like the vitamin C. By the way, probably the malic acid in sweet tarts, which do have some sugar in them but are really sour, would work as well. You could suck on a lemon. You could drink apple cider vinegar, or use it as a mouthwash anyway. It doesn't matter where the acid comes from. We're not talking about magic medicines here. These are not highly targeted, highly sophisticated things. You're talking about raising the acid level in your head and neck and upper respiratory system in order to slow the replication of the virus and delay the further symptoms that come from out of control populations until your immune system has time to deal with the thing. So for a cold or influenza, 3 to 5 days, a couple of chewables every hour or so is very effective for me. I kind of start with a shock value of about 12 of them, just eating them and chewing them as hard and fast as I can, and then do that for really 3 full days of taking the vitamin C. And I can usually forestall it. I haven't cured anything. I still got the cold or the flu, I guess, but the symptoms never really got to be anything. I knew I had it, but barely. And then my immune system kicked in and eradicated it. So that's Jack's theory of home cures for viruses. Will it work with the coronavirus? Well, I don't know. It's really a function of how fast, how aggressively the virus seems to replicate. And what I'm seeing with these 14-day developments and so forth is it's not really a very aggressive. It's easily transmitted, but it's not really a very aggressive replicator. It's not that fast. I think you could manage that fairly successfully by elevating your acidic level until your body's going to produce these antibodies, I guess you would call T lymphocyte killer cells, that will give you immunity from the virus. So I'm almost embarrassed to report this in public, but all the people around me, I've kind of got them doing this, and we don't have colds anymore. We don't have influenza. We just don't have that anymore. But as soon as it rears its ugly head, and most of us can tell when it's coming on, we grab that bottle of vitamin C and start to chomp on them. Not because vitamin C is any magic thing. It's just an easy, cheap way to raise the acid level. Copious quantities of unsweetened lemonade. That would work great. It would probably work better. I just don't like the taste of the super sour taste of raw lemons. If you put sugar in it, I'm sorry, you've neutralized a lot, not all, but a lot of the acidity in the lemonade, the zinc, or the vitamin C. Vitamin C in capsule form, I've tried it. You can get much higher doses, a full 1,000 milligrams in a capsule, but it doesn't seem to do anything. I think it raises the acid level in your gut, but that's not what we're after here. Upper respiratory, eye, ears, nose, and throat is where you want to raise the acidity. And that seems to be effective. So that's my word on what you can actually do about coronavirus. The biggest thing is avoid crowds. Staying at home is always an option, but there's a lot of things you can do that are very good. Richard and his wife went to a nature preserve in 45-degree weather the other day to go bird watching. And they didn't come in contact with another human being. There's just not that much bird watching going on in February here in Missouri. And so there's a lot of activities you can participate in that don't involve closed-in, indoor, close proximity interaction with other humanoids. And so that's, I think, much more effective than hand washing is just not to be there in the first place. When I do go into a hospital, I never punch an elevator button with my finger. I always use a car key or something else in my pocket, a pocket knife or something. And I stab the button with that, and the elevator works just as well. But I don't need, a hospital is reeking with sick people. That's why they come there. They go there to die. They go there because they're sick. So I'm not a real fan of visiting people in the hospital. If it's my wife or somebody really close to me, you kind of got to go. But I don't have to rub my hands all over the place because it's reeking with germs. So that's certainly appropriate, but the big thing with this coronavirus, I think, is going to be avoid indoor crowds. Just don't go there. If you're going to classes at the local university, how about let's just drop and come back in the fall? Why spend any time with that? Eating in cafeterias. Hey, how about cooking at home? Even grocery shopping, that sort of thing. Amazon and most grocery stores now will deliver to your house. And it's not the food that's going to get you. If you're afraid of that, simply let it set out for 45 minutes or so, and you'll be good to go. And so that's the thing. Okay, now we're down 476 points. If you all have been watching this while I've been prattling on, this is absolute madness with the stock market. It is absolute madness. It's been up 350 points, down 471 now. Here's Tesla was up $50. Now it's up 17 at 761. Amazon's now minus. Apple's now down. Here we are. We're 500 points down and cratering. This is absolute panic. You don't need to panic. I panicked last Monday. Get the hell out. Let them sort it out. Do you miss an opportunity? Yeah, well, maybe. You might also miss an opportunity to get killed. So I'm sitting here on the sidelines watching all this, quite entertained. But this frothiness indicates a top, not a bottom. And so I think yesterday was a dead cat bounce, and we're going to continue to slide. There will be days where we'll bounce back, but I predict a gradual decline into hell in the stock market for the next month. And I've told you how you can tell when it's over. When the number of coronavirus stories on the internet decreases to some low number, say 100 an hour, that's when we're no longer panicking over it, and you can start to take a look at some bargains out there. And I think they'll be there, but you need to have your powder dry and be in cash to be able to do anything with it. So that's my stock trading advice for Tuesday, March 3rd, and my coronavirus advice. Don't hang out indoors with a bunch of strange people, and delete your kids. Just get rid of them. Tell them they're orphans now and send them to Canada or something. Wash your hands. I still don't know where that comes from. But if you think you're getting a little bit of anything, a cold, a flu, or a coronavirus, chomp down on some chewable vitamin C, drink some apple vinegar, make some sugarless lemonade, but get your acid level up for 3 to 5 days. And that will give you a better shot at having you still technically have the cold or the flu, but if it doesn't hurt you, if you don't have any big symptoms, what do you care? And so that's what's happening here. You're not really curing anything. You're slowing the replication until your immune system can fight it off. And if all that's going on at a low level and you're just kind of feeling crummy but not really suffering, well and good enough. Stay with us. Let's take a quick look at my sunshine. And here we go, as you can see. And this is all the times we've done a frequency shift and shut off the grid tied inverters.